Hello, everyone. Now we are into the session 2 of today's seminar, directly from the session 1. In session 1, we had wonderful speakers, Clifford Cobb and Helena Hodge. Thank you for your impressive speeches and discussion. And we talked about why we must get ready for the next economy, next step of the economy. And Helena Hodge put an emphasis on local empowerment, and Mr. Clifford Cobb, even though he was a little pessimistic, but still criticized GDP and the urgency to define genuine progress for our generation. Also, he put an emphasis on politics, the role of political power. And now, in session 2, we are going to dig this topic a little deeper than session 1, which was a little bit more general. Now in session 2, first of all, Lab 2050 research team, led by Professor Choi will introduce the concept of genuine progress in Korea and the indicators to measure it. So actually, the research team developed for 1 year to this new GPI for Korea. And we'll discuss this. It will be presented and discussed with prominent panelists from other countries. So first of all, we have Anders Hayden, a professor at Department of Political Science, Dalhousie University in Canada. Are you there, Professor Hayden?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Hi, thank you for joining us. And we have Professor CG, professor at Department of Development Economics, Beijing University in China. Are you there, Professor G? Hello. Yes. Thank you very much for joining us. And we have also prominent participants here. I see Dong-Yeon Kim, Chairman and Senior Intern of Joyful Rebellion Foundation and former Minister of Economy and Finance. Mr. Dong-Yeon.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm here.
Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. I am very pleased to participate in this meaningful seminar. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And also, do you have Professor Mr. Jindo Park from GNH Forum? I can see him. Probably he's a little late. And also, we have Mr. Park Yang-soo from Bank of Korea, who is the director of Economic Statistics and Department, which is in charge of GDP, actually. So, are you there?
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. Do we have Mr. Paul Choi from Statistics Research Institute of Statistics Korea?
From Bank of Korea.
Yes, hi.
Thank you for joining us. So these experts are actually in charge of Korean statistics, the official statistics. So they have advised our research team a lot for the last 1 year. So thank you very much for joining our last discussion session. So do we have Professor Young-Joo Nielsen here? Yes. Yes, thank you for joining us. And also, Professor Lee Jae from Seoul National University is going to join us soon. And am I missing someone? Probably everyone. I will introduce other participants when they join us. And now I will directly start the session. And first, we will invite Professor Choi which is actually we found the lab 2050 together. I mean, Dr. Choi and me as trustees of the board. And now Dr. Choi led this project, GPI project, for a year. And then he will introduce the KGPI for you, Mr. Choi.
Okay. Can I have a... hello, everyone. Great to be here and great to see everyone here. It's a great opportunity to share our new idea and present a new genuine progress indicator. As one just said, I'm Youngjun from Yonsei University, principal investigator of this project. And thank you also for the first session participant, the Gunna and Wonjae, Helena and Clifford. They're kind of setting very nicely about the context of this new indicator. And this is our the research team. The next slide, please. Yeah, this is our research team members. They are going to explain each part later.
And thank you also for the first session participant.
I'm the principal investigator, and the Professor Son Jong-chil, Dr. Bang Gaun, Professor Yoon Ja-young, Professor Lee Ji-young, and Dr. Yu Jung-min are going to explain the finding of their own part later on. We have so much discussion about how to translate a genuine progress indicator in Korean, but we finally reached a consensus saying 참 성장 지표. I hope our Korean audience like this Korean name as we do. Let me go back to about 100 years ago in the Western world when the scars of the First World War still remained and the Great Depression had just started. The Great Depression lasted about 10 years and more in some countries. And according to one source, over 12 million people in the United States were unemployed during this period. It's a very something similar in COVID-19 time. It completely shattered the capitalistic system they had trusted and was forced to envision a new system and new world, such as like New Deal by Roosevelt. The universal and comprehensive welfare state was its byproduct in many countries, and more importantly, GDP was created in this period by Simon Kuznets and his colleagues to measure the impact of the depression and also the recovery from it. Then it became the most important international economic indicator, going through the Bretton Woods Conference in 1940s and adopted by the United Nations in 1950s and also China in 1993. Now, in the 21st century, we are facing another great transformation. COVID-19, climate change, digitalization. For example, online seminars, as what we are doing now, are telling us we should buckle up and be ready for another great transformation. Do you agree? For me, I do not clearly see what is coming, but vaguely, I could see we had better well prepare. Then, do we have some kind of North Star or lighthouse, benchmark, signpost, whatever that is, to take us to the right direction in this darkness and uncertainty? As well known, and also Simon Kuznets also empathized, GDP is the indicator to measure the size of economy. As you see, the monetary value of goods and services produced in a country never meant to be a well-being or societal development indicator. But somehow, unlike the intention of Simon Kuznets, it has always been our North Star and signpost in our society, the most important indicator for almost all countries to see how each government or nation is doing. It's more like a success of the government or success of nation. Behind it, there is an idea of the trickle down. As you see the picture there, if the size of GDP gets bigger, the outcome of employment, welfare, and happiness would be followed naturally. But is it true? There are so many studies now arguing that's not the case. Probably you also agree with that. It is a known fact now. And furthermore, the GDP approach has damaged our environment much. And GDP does not seem to be our lighthouse anymore. And if we don't have a lighthouse or a North Star or a signpost, then it seems we're lost in darkness. So let's go back to the basics. What is genuine progress? What do you think a genuine progress is? These two quotes, among many others, saying what genuine progress and development is. It is not economic growth or the sum of production simply, but people are the real wealth of nations, and the main goal of development is to create an enabling environment for people to enjoy long, health, and creative lives. Obviously, the growth is not the end, but means, important means. So we should ask growth of what and for what, as Kuznets said. In other words, we need to look at not quantity, but quality of growth. What we say is a 참성장. We call it the genuine growth. 100 years after the Great Depression, we are facing multiple socio-economic, political challenges ahead of us. Together with the pandemic we are experiencing, which might come again in different form: digitalization, climate change, demographic change, de-globalizations, and de-democratization, which might reduce your and your children's happiness and well-being. In this context, our research team and Lab 2050 are asking what growth means for you. In politics and society, different ideas are competing each other. It is well understood the market and firms and enterprises are focusing on price rather than value, and present rather than future. But the problem is the modern politics and governments, the public sector, also pay much attention to GDPism idea, which means the present price rather than empathizing future and value. The reason we criticize GDP as a North Star is they neglect these other dimensions, as you see from the figure, such as solidaristic idea, including care, welfare, and third sector activities, and investment idea, including investment children, youth, and skill, and last but not least, sustainability idea, including climate change and environment. Even after the pandemic, COVID-19 we are experiencing, if the most important question in our society is what is the growth rate in next year, I think we are heading towards the wrong direction. We need a new indicator, including not only GDPism idea, but also other three equally important ideas. That is where we started this project from the last year, last autumn actually, and we have scanned whether there's a good alternative indicator replacing the position of GDP in our society. The beyond GDPism effort is not new at all. Probably you know a lot of other effort. There has been so much discussion, so many indicators created last 50 years or more, but unfortunately, so little impact so far. For example, social indicator movement started in the 1960s in the United States, which made most national governments and international organizations establish their own social indicators. For example, we have social indicator too. Its influence disappeared for some time during the heyday of neoliberalism, like 1980s in particular. But then it came again in line with increasing inequality, withering neoliberalism, and 2007 financial crisis. The Stiglitz Commission, many people know, is one of the examples. We see three streams of effort of the alternative GDP indicator. One type is dashboard style, such as Better Life Index by OECD and normal social indicators by the national government. The second one is to provide one single index, like Human Development Index or Happy Planet Index, Social Progress Index. There are so many more. The final effort is to create a monetary value, like Genuine Progress Indicator we are going to explain more. after reviewing almost all possible candidates within our research team, we made the following principles to decide a new indicator for the new paradigm in 21st century. It should be a people-oriented rather than old-style growth-oriented paradigm. And it should contain the sustainability element. People's current economic welfare is important, but without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, which means the sustainability. Also, practically, we want one comprehensive indicator with monetary value so that we can compare it to GDP. Finally, we want an indicator which could feed policy change and reforms. In previous panel session, Clifford said the GPI should be a political tool, as GDP is not only economic tool, but also a political tool. That's why we want kind of a strong interaction and feedback with the policy and politics. Genuine progress indicator is qualified when we use these standards. As you can see from IDA's work and on your right side, it offers one comprehensive monetary indicator comparable to GDP, combining net economic welfare starting from personal consumption, not production, together with sustainability elements. And we add the parts that contribute to our well-being and development, and we also subtract the part which do not contribute to our lives. As I will show you, an increasing number of studies have been conducted to measure GPI, and some United States, such as American states, such as Maryland and Vermont, have officially adopted this indicator. So what is GPI? This is definition. GPI is an estimate, we can also say the proxy of the net contributions of social and economic activity to individual welfare and long-term prosperity of our people. As you see these figure, this very small letter, I'm sorry for that, but as you see, our efforts are not new at all. Though we modify to some extent, there have been many attempts to measure GPI globally, comparatively, in one nation and locally as well. The nation GPI effort, including Australia, Belgium, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan, Korea, New Zealand, UK, US, and many others. So we have reviewed these studies and particularly paid more attention to Maryland GPI 1.0 and GPI 2.0 created by Talbot and Beisdorf. What I present is not the final output of the research. We have just baked the bread. So this is preliminary research so far. But we hope to develop our framework and measurement further after the seminar. We have tried to develop existing GPI framework and measurement, and this is the results so far. Existing GPI research has 3 or 4 GPI areas, like economic, social, environmental, or built social, human, natural capital. But we have the 5 areas of GPI. GPI means genuine progress indicator. The GPI economy, GPI environment, GPI human capital, GPI work and life, and GPI digital, which is the first attempt in GPI studies to measure. My colleagues will explain each section one by one from now on. Professor Son Jong-chil is going to explain GPI economy. Please. We cannot hear you, Professor Son Jong-chil. Could you turn on your microphone? Okay, yes, we can hear you.
I'm not sure. You can hear? Okay. Thank you for your kind introduction. I'm the Jong-chil Son from the Hanguk University of Foreign Studies. And it's very honored to present and discuss about this issue. So my section is economic indicators of GPI in Korea. So in my understanding, the GPI is started from the adjustment of GDP components like consumption, investment, government expenditure, and net export. How can we adjust the GDP components? Well, the adjustment for the better measurement for social welfare and happiness of people. So next slide, please. So we are actually based on the GPI 1.0 because the discussions of a GPI or alternative measurement with a discussion about GDP is just started. So we are more focusing on the existing and more traditional framework like GPI 1.0, but also try to reflect the new components, new elements from the GPI 2.0. Like first one is enlarging consumption scope associated with the income inequality adjustment. Economy income inequality is not just adjusted, not just reflected at the first gross initial consumption, but more larger and larger part of household consumption. Second part is about the reflection of a public provision, because like other countries in Korea, the government expenditure has a more and more importance in the GDP share. So we are care about this public provision. Third thing is about the household pollution abatement. We are initially calculated household pollution abatement based on the GPI 1.0, but I am suspicious about some underestimated the efforts, the expenditures of a household to reduce the pollution by themselves. So we are we are consider alternatively also defensive expenditures, which can more identify more broadly the efforts of household consumption. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So GPI framework can be expressed by this one equation here for the economic indicators. The first part is about the household consumption deducted by the durable goods, but also plus by the services from durable stock, and also deduct by the defensive expenditures, or cost of household pollution abatement. These all consumption, devised consumption will be adjusted by the Korean income inequality status compared to the standard. The basic year is 1991, which one is lowest income inequality from the public official data set. And also there is a other part is added from this GPI economy indicators, like net capital investment and change of net external assets and services from the road stock and public provision. Okay, move on to the next slides. Next slide, please. So this is about the some very measurement issues. Defensive expenditures is calculated from the applying each different shares on the household consumption by purpose. So more shares on the tobacco and alcohol beverages maybe probably would be not less related with household well-being and more related with the restaurant and accommodation services, like less and less shares, something like that. And also costs of household pollution abatement. We are following the Maryland 1.0 calculations. So household efforts, expenditure for the cost of water pollution, reduction of air pollution, and the cost of waste disposal. And about the public provisions, we are also generally following the previous literature, applying different shares on the government expenditure by purpose. and more shares like recreation and culture and religion, and less shares like defense and public order and safety, and other 50 shares. And two things is maybe distinctive compared to the other existing literature. First one is we are directly consider the social security benefit in kind to the public provision, separated from the government expenditure. Also, we are clearly consider non-profit institutions serving for household expenditures for the public provision, because these two items are believed to be very directly tied to the household well-being. And Gini coefficient is we are calculating from 1991 to 2020, and 1991 is the lowest year as a basic basement. And very interesting about the Gini coefficients. The Korean Gini coefficient is has a rising trend from the early of 1990 up to 2011 or 12, and then after that we have a downward trend in the Gini coefficient. Okay, next slide, please. So finally, this is a summing up result of GPI economy indicators. This is ratios of nominal GDP. So actually, we have faced very large fluctuations when compared to the nominal GDPs or real GDPs. So three big drops here in the three crises, like here is a 1997 Asian crisis, and another big drop is 2008 global financial crisis, and now 2020 is about the COVID-19 pandemic shock. When you're looking at the component ratio of a nominal GDP, where consumption, adjusted consumption is very stable, but the net capital investment, there is some big fluctuations. Well, but their share is getting smaller and smaller for the 2010s when compared to the earlier period. I guess the public provisions share is replacing more and more the status of capital investment. So in spending shares of public provision as time goes by. And right table is about the share ratio of GDPs and nominal amounts. Well, like I said, the cost of the household pollution abatement, I guess there is some underestimated about the household efforts to reduce pollutions. But the defensive expenditures here is defensive expenditure is very largely identifying the efforts. So big discrepancies we can find from this calculation. So this is about the GPI economy indicator part. Thank you for your listening and attention.
Okay, Professor Yoon Jung for GPI environment, please.
Thank you. I'm Jung Lee. I'm from Buyong National University. I'm gonna talk about the other part of GPI, which is a group of environmental indicators. We cannot emphasize enough the importance of environment in our life. The donut you are looking at on the left shows two boundaries. The inner boundary is the social foundation, and the outer boundary is the environmental ceiling. Between the two boundaries lies an area shaped like a donut, where inclusive and sustainable economic development takes place. GDP has been criticized among many regions because it does not reflect the outer boundary, the environmental ceiling. I recently learned that Kuznets also thought the cost of pollution should be taken out from the calculation of value added. By the way, there is a typo in the name of author. And so we can say that considering environmental damage is in line with his original idea. So in that sense, GPI must be a better measure. Next slide, please. Next slide. As I calculate the GPI environmental part in South Korea, I basically follow the framework by Long and Ji 2019. By the way, glad to have you, Professor Ji, online. And I add two indicators, the cost of natural disasters and solid waste pollution. I should mention that it's not due to include the cost of waste pollution. But compared to other indicators, it seems less popular in the sense that it is included in some studies while it's not in other studies. But in Korea, it's very relevant. And I do not consider three costs: farmland change, noise pollution, and ozone depletion. The first two costs are simply hard to reliably estimate their values, and the third cost is not so relevant anymore, at least in South Korea. So my Korean GPI environmental part consists of 8 indicators, as you can see on the right table. I think there are two issues I should mention, which are about the cost of climate change and depletion of non-renewables. 6 other indicators are directly related to current welfare. But regarding the cost of climate change, there is a smoking gun yet that climate change was happening in the Korean Peninsula for the period of this study. In the case of depletion of non-renewable, we import almost all of fossil fuels, so it does not, will not directly impact the welfare of the current and future generations in Korea. Of course, the future price of fossil fuel will increase or decrease depending on the advancement of technology, but such price change effect will be taken into account in other indicators like economic part. It is my understanding that these two costs should be considered in terms of natural capital depreciation. So I included these costs following the standard approach of GPI. Next slide, please. Here are my equations to calculate each indicator. I'm not going to detail, but my principle was to make as less arbitrary assumption as possible and to use Korean official data except for 2 indicators. For the cost of climate change, I used the estimate of social cost of carbon, which was announced last March by the US government. And for depletion of non-renewables, I borrowed the value of replacement cost from 2 recent studies. Next slide, please. This is my result. For your understanding, you can regard 1 trillion Korean won to be similar to 1 billion US dollar. As you expect, the GPI environmental part is on the rise and 10 times up over the last 25 years. And it accounts for more than 50% of GDP on average. One noticeable thing is there's one dominant factor, which is depletion of non-renewable. For example, it explains 70% of the GPI environmental part in 2018. In case you wonder, there's a small dip during 2004 to 2007. It is mainly due to the effect of exchange rate. During that period, Korean currency was relatively strong. Okay, I think I'm done, and I'd like to hand over to the next presenter, Dr. Ban.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Bangaum for GPI Human Capital, please.
Yes, hello everyone. Some economic activities are made by the stock of human capital, as you know. GPI HEC focuses on societal utility derived from human capital. Societal utility in GPI HEC consists of social benefits and costs from human capital. Societal benefits in GPI HEC means positive externality from good human capital. Social cost from negative externality from bad human capital. GPI HEC also includes social cost of unemployment, which is considered as an external result in capitalism, but not from the individual competency. Previous GPI studies don't reach an agreement on whether human capital is included in the GPI. Tarbers and Weisdorf use social benefit from human capital as pilot accounts and keep it as a sub-indicator for human capital services. They emphasizes the value of further research on these issues. Our project adopts the method in Tarbers and Weisdorf studies. Next slide, please. A GPI-HEC consists of social benefits from the positive human capital, social cost from negative human capital, underutilization cost of human capital. Social benefits from higher education, 20,000 US dollar times competence index times exchange rate. 20,000 US dollar from the previous studies. Competence index reflect tertiary graduate students' real competency. Okay, social cost from crime equals 363,000 won times crime index. Crime index reflect is used because we want to make a time series data. Okay, the cost from unemployment equals the number of unemployment times average annual rate. Next slide, please. The result is, as you can see, this figure shows the constantly increasing trend from 1997 to 2019. Next slide, please. The blue line is the GPI-HEC, GDP per HEC per capita. As you can see, this result also shows a constantly increasing trend from 1997 to the 2019. In the 2019, GPI-HEC per capita almost 5 million won. It is 5,000 US dollar. Shows increasing increase of GPI-HEC. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ban. The Professor Yoon Jae-young for the GPI work and life, please.
Okay, let me start with GPI-WL. GDP ignores variable activities that create economic well-being from non-market sector, while includes economic costs accompanying the creation of market. GPI-WL focuses on non-market-based benefits and costs, particularly in relation to families, households, and the community. The rationale for establishing GPI-WL is that market and non-market sectors are interrelated, so the limited time resources are allocated in the two contested sectors. More time resources into the market sector will lead to higher GDP, but negatively impacts on non-market-based consumption and utility. Next, please. Previous GPI studies seldom categorize this part as separate one. Most GPI studies address GPI-WL components as either non-market-based well-being or social costs. Most of the components I will address here are included as part of the social indicator in GPI 1.0. And GPI 2.0 separates out increased consumption by unpaid labor from social costs incurred by economic activities as different categories. But we try to put together social benefits and costs associated with these at GPI-WL that stands alone. Next, please. GPI-WL consists of social benefits and costs. Social benefits in GPI-WL includes the consumption gains from unpaid care and housework and voluntary work. The modification to the existing treatment of unpaid housework and care work is to consider the possibility that the marginal social utility from these services could be reduced by the unpaid work inequalities among individuals, which would mostly reflect gender inequality in unpaid work. So we adopted the similar approach taken by the previous GPI studies dealing with inequalities in consumption from market output. There are three components of social costs. The first one is the cost of lost leisure time for the employee. The idea is that how much leisure time we have lost in earning market income. But whether the leisure time has increased or decreased depends on the reference time period. In Korea, the available data show that leisure time has increased due to the reduction in statutory working time. So for our project, the change in leisure time will enter as social benefits to GPI. The second one is time expenditure costs associated with commuting. Individuals put significant resources into earning market income. Although these costs are inevitable, the cost clearly impacts on consumption and utility. The third one is the cost of family change. The previous GPI studies seem to include this one because the family breakup is partly caused by the market-oriented lifestyles. Legal fees for divorces are often seen as part of defensive private expenditure. Next, please. So here is the summary of measurement methods for each component. The main data used is Korean time survey for the amounts of time spent on unpaid labor, leisure, and commuting. There are only 5 time-use surveys, so I assumed linear growth between the years that don't have the data. And the mean wage rate to calculate the monetary values of the time, I use the employment conditions and wage survey. I employ the replacement cost methods for unpaid labor and opportunity cost method for time for leisure and commuting. Next, please. So let me tell you about the brief summary of the results. I will point out a couple of results. The graph on the left shows both the social benefits and costs from WL have increased from 1997 and 2020, except the years affected by the discontinuities of data series. The increases are mainly due to the increases in wage rates and the population size, while the amounts of time did not change that much. The table on the right side shows that the social benefits and costs measured as percentage of GDP have steadily increased, except the consumption from housework and care work. As of 2020, benefits of unpaid work amounts to about 20% of GDP, and cost of unpaid work inequalities account for 1.5% of GDP. Cost of commuting turned out to be significant at about 10.5% of GDP. This is it. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next is the GPI Digital. Dr. Yu Jung-min, please.
Thank you. Let's start talking about the digital part. Please consider this part as a new attempt. This part is a little different from the previous parts. That's because with digital transformation, the quantity and quality of digital services have increased recently. Nowadays, most digital services are offered at zero price. As almost everyone can feel it, free digital services are deeply embedded in our lives. Although some digital goods may earn revenues from advertising, but this is an intermediate good and does not contribute to GDP directly. Next, please. It means that increasing the need to analyze how digital services contribute to consumer well-being. So there are several studies that have made an experimental attempt in this field, and we decided to calculate the value using a similar methodology. For example, Brynjolfsson's study evaluated free digital goods such as Facebook that carry no monetary price tag, and they use the contingent value method. We call it CVM. It consists of two methods, WTP or WTA. WTP refers to how much you are willing to pay to enjoy the utility of a non-market good consistently, and WTA means that when a non-market good loses its utility, how much you are willing to accept to tolerate this situation. In prior research, the two methods are mixed, but there is an argument that the following principle is needed. WTP for welfare gain, WTA compensation for loss. Therefore, in this study, looking at the welfare acquisition perspective, we decide to use WTP. Next, please. In this study, we wanted to measure the value of free digital services, which means that can be used for free if it is accessible in the network. The method used is the CVM, as I told you. It is a simple, flexible, non-market valuation method. In order to derive CVM values, there are many ways depending on how the question is asked in the survey. In this study, we used a double-bounded dichotomous choice model. It considers the response to two bits, the second one being determined according to the response to the first. Next, please. The following questions are actually used in our survey. Are you willing to pay X1 per month to continue using free digital services? If you answer yes to this question, you will be asked double X, and if you answer no, you will be asked once more at half the amount. The next key indicator is the number of internet users. Unlike other parts, the digital part was impossible to build data over time because the survey was conducted only once in this point. However, the increase in the number of internet users can be seen as an expansion of the scope of free digital service benefits. So we use this figure. And finally, we consider that digital services bring convenience and negative aspects at the same time. So we ask the following question and use the result also. How do you think free digital services are affecting your quality of life? Using the result of this question was a process to prevent the negative aspects of digital service from being converted into positive values. The survey found that WTP was about $18 per month, and that the average contribution to quality of life is 7.5. Next, please. And this graph is based on the indicators described above. Since statistics on the number of internet users exist since 2000, only values after 2000 were obtained. The value has steadily increased due to the increase in the number of internet users, accounting for about 1% of GDP. Of course, it is possible to argue that the value of free digital services are much greater. However, as this study is almost the first attempt in GPI study, so we tried not to over-derive the value. And the larger scope of survey would be better to answer this result of this study. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so starting from the personal consumption, then we add the positive contribution of the unpaid work and the higher education and digital free benefit and others. And also we subtract the cost of environment and also the crime, unemployment, and also we take income and gender equality into account. So here is the aggregate result. As you see, our GPI has increased along with GDP, but there has been a gap between GDP and GPI. GPI, when including net capital investment, was around 70% of GDP in 2020. There are some large fluctuation in GPI from time to time, mostly due to the net capital investment, which was excluded from recent GPI research, and we are also considering whether we include that aspect or not. Okay, and can I look at the next slide, slide 43, please? Okay, the gap between GDP and GPI has been smaller since 2010, partly because public consumption expenditure increased, whereas the effect of income inequality decreased. This is one of the probably puzzle to some of you because the income inequality actually decreased since 2010, but is possibly is true also there's some kind of measurement issue, but probably we'll look into this issue further. There are further issues to be discussed. We need to develop our theoretical basis and conceptual basis as well, also sophisticate our measurement and sub-indicators. Also, we'd like to discuss with our international colleagues whether to focus more on international comparison or to develop context-specific GPI, and how to improve policy relevance and how to use this indicator in politics. That's our very strong interest. In the end, we hope to integrate our GPI in Korean policymaking process, something like GPI impact assessment, or as you see from your left side, the New Zealand style well-being budget process. We know GPI is not perfect indicator, and GDP is possibly a more rigorous and objective indicator. Even if we make our own GPI, we still need GDP for measuring the production of our economy. However, as we discussed, GDP is not the indicator to measure well-being, progress, or development. That's why we are proposing a genuine progress indicator. Basically, we try to measure what we treasure. Thank you very much.